Fortunately for my son, both his parents are lawyers. So it was a real problem to try and explain to fellow 4 or 5-year-olds what his parents do. So, and that's what got me started thinking as to what it is that I do that I can explain to a 4-year-old. And so the way I pitched it to him is, people come to daddy and mommy and ask us questions and we help them. And so what do you help them about? Say every question that they have, you usually find answers for them. What kind of questions? Questions to which most other people can't find answers. So that was the way in which this script was written for him when he was 4 years old. Now it came on from that, I realized that that's really what lawyers do, and we can do that in very different ways. It led to then a conversation in school amongst parents to have a career day. And the school he goes to has a career day for 11-year-olds. It's not for 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, it's for 11-year-olds. So that they can take an aptitude test that gives them a choice of careers. They can think about what are the careers that are interesting for them. Some of them have preconceived notions. They want to be journalists, they want to be doctors, they want to be engineers. And so what the school does is get them in groups of 10 or 11, maximum 12 people, and then gets them to spend 40 minutes with people of different careers. And thankfully, in the group of parents, we have some unusual ones as well. People who are in the media business, people who are actuaries. I don't know how many people we know of are actuaries, and how many people know what actuaries do. So we found it quite difficult. How do you explain to an 11-year-old what an actuary does? So we tried to get together and figure out this message. How do we explain it? So when I thought my time to explain to them about a lawyer was difficult, I found that actually is even more difficult. But here's how I do it. And I tried to demonstrate this when I was in law school last year. So some of you who met me last year would have seen the way I tried to do it. So the way I do it is, rather than tell them what I do, I walk around with them and ask them, so what do you do after class when you're not in school? And these are 11-year-olds. Okay? So try and give me an answer. Yeah, what do you play with your friends? Play cricket. How good are you playing? Do you think you make the Indian team? Do you think you make IPL at least? Maybe not. Okay? So what do you think you'd like to be doing when you're not in class?
Drawing.
Like drawing. Very good. What kind of drawing do you like? Okay. And you're very good at it? You're mediocre. But you like it. You like to hang out with artists. You like to be with them. Okay, very good. You
Comics.
read comics. Very good. What kind of comics do you like to read? Calvin and Hobbes, fantastic. And you like the merchandise as well? What Calvin and Hobbes t-shirts? You got toys also? Yeah, fantastic. So, do you think you can write comics? Do you read enough? You can write? Will it sell like Calvin and Hobbes, or will it just be fun?
Calvin and Hobbes is fun.
Yeah, fantastic. Great. So, if you had the chance to actually hang out with the ideas, would that be your life and somebody paid you for it? So let me give you a good story. I have this friend of mine. It's called Nandan Khanna. He's a lawyer. All he does is hangs out with ideal teams. Wouldn't that be a fun thing to do? Okay? You like to paint. You like to hang out with artists. You know the artist's best friend? The guy who sells his paintings. Who licenses it so he can have prints. You can have it on t-shirts. Change the little colors. And when I was in London, there was this guy who couldn't earn a living. His name was Damien Hirst. And we helped him. And today you Google it, this guy is worth almost $1 billion. He's a good friend of mine. He's called Damien Hirst. Okay? So, Calvin and Hobbes. You know, you wouldn't be reading Calvin and Hobbes but for the lawyers. There would be no Calvin and Hobbes. So you want to find out what they're going to do next with Calvin and Hobbes? If they're going to make a Calvin and Hobbes movie, and you want to be there and seeing the movie before anybody else does, You want to be meeting the stars who are going to the voiceover? The best friend is a lawyer. That's your life. So I'll give you 3 examples. These were not rehearsed. They're just random people with random thoughts. But this is what I take to 11-year-olds. And try and find out what is it they like and how can law actually be a way of them living that dream. And it's going to be different, and it is different. So I've got people coming up with similar kind of ideas. I've got people say I play video games. And so in my old firm we used to act for Sony, the old PlayStation movies. So I give an example of that. Somebody else said, I like to watch movies. So I said, what are you watching? He said, Dan Brown, for example. And I said, my old firm, we did the litigation on the Dan Brown novel, The Holy Grail. And then I got to watch the making of the movie and hang out with the crowd and the plot and all of that. So, kind of what I'm trying to do here is get them to get from what they like to how the law can actually get them to doing what they like for a living. If somebody else says, no, I like the outdoors and I like to hang around, no. Environmental law gives you a chance to go live the outdoor life and be a lawyer at the same time. So I kind of have to think on my feet, but that's the trip I use to try and demonstrate that whatever it is your passion is, law will help you achieve that. Now, an accountant would say the same thing, so I'm not saying law is a unique way of doing it. But all I'm saying is you could be an accountant to an artist, good life, but I'm saying here's an easy way of saying you can be passionate about something and law can be your way of riding that passion. And we have enough good examples around here and that's the prep really. That do I have a long list of people who I can connect to each of these things and say, I know a chap who does this, I know a chap who does this, I know a chap who does this. I have done one of these things and then make this connection with each one of them. I found that to be quite a way of people remembering it. I've gone back to doing this now for 4 years and everybody who saw me the previous year has sent on more people and more people and more people. And several of them come back to me and say, and write notes. So I've got notes from them saying, I never thought I'd want to be a lawyer. And now 3 years on, when they're in whatever grade it is, they have to pick their specials. They've chosen to do it and they very sweetly written a note back to me and said, I remember you came and did a talk for me for my class and I've now decided I really want to be a lawyer and this is what I'm going to do. So I've got 5 years of data on this that I'm happy to share with you guys. But I found that was a great way of connecting individually to people because as a group it's very difficult to say, I will meet all your aspirations. But if you take small groups, it may not work when you're doing 500 people. It may, if you pick examples like this and demonstrate how law can do it and challenge them to pick one. I want to be a police officer. So one of the questions we had thought of was, in your skit, to say that, what is it that pains you more? I want to help people. I'm going back to my 4-year-old conversation. I want to help people. How do you want to help people? Against what is the problem you want to solve? This oppressive government. So I have my friend Shrikar, who is an IAS officer. So we can relate to not some story, not some myth. We have enough examples amongst ourselves from our own personal lives who we can connect to and say, here's the guy. Or someone says, ye daroga hai. Sabko andar dalta hai. So don't you want to be that daroga's boss? I will tell you who the daroga's boss is. He's a guy from law school. Who's sitting there and we will get him to do whatever you want to do for you. So to me, that is the way in which I have found it easiest to connect to how either the pain or the pleasure of whatever their aspiration is to be addressed using the law. Whether that's an example of fantasizing, yes, but also in a way of saying that it is achievable. That's really what I wanted to share with Sharma and I spoke about. Say, how can we make it something that they can relate to? Otherwise, most things, so for example in the skit, beyond reasonable doubt, how you would explain it to most kids? I can't explain it to my dad. I really couldn't explain it to my dad, and most normal people don't get the difference. So skit or no skit, it's really a difficult one. So I'm just thinking, is there something more tangible we can do They will be seeing a movie version of what you did on TV anyway. How can we be different? How can they make the connection? I can be the judge, I can be the prosecutor, I can be the defense counsel. Where does that connect come from? And how could we really stereotype the law with this? So we're trying to get them out of the stereotype, but are we really enforcing and reinforcing that stereotype? That's really the challenge. I say you can be a business leader. So we have examples in the West of CEOs and chairmen who are lawyers. So Lloyd Blackfein, chairman of Goldman Sachs. Chuck Prince, CEO of Citibank. So you've got enough examples of lawyers who make exceptionally good business leaders. But lawyers who make politicians, there's plenty of them. But those are the kind of examples where you can say, when people say, I want to play sport. So you've got this, but there are people who Olympic gold medalists who joined law firms in London. So I used to go to a law firm where we had an Olympic rower who joined. Pinson Masons has what's the guy's name who won 4 Olympic golds in rowing? Whatever the guy was, Ben something. Somebody here help me. So he's in Pinson Masons, got training contracts. Ben Ainsley. So there's enough people we can connect to the aspirations of those kids. And I'm talking about 11-year-olds. It might get a little better with 18-year-olds or 16-year-olds or whatever. But I found that's the easy way of relating law to them. Okay, it requires some research. We need to think of how many ideas these guys can come up with in terms of what they like. But I've had things like, I just chat with my friends. So can you find a better way of chatting with your friends? Is it really, what do you use to chat with your friends? Do you think it would be better to come up with a new idea? It could be a social activity. Lawyering helps. So there are things where sometimes I get caught. They say, no, I just like to chill with my friends. So it's a really hard one. But apart from things like that, where I really can't help with how a law can help if somebody just wants to chill. That's the only one where I've been really stuck in 4 years. There are people who chill with the law. No, that I leave to you. You're the one chill.
Or guys who chill because of the law. Go to law school and chill.
So look at who just do it around.
So, Murali, that was really fascinating in terms of approaching it, particularly with 11-year-old, because this is a big bottleneck, right? I mean, how do you connect the law and similar to Murali's experience, I think when we've been on our first trips as well, our biggest challenge was really getting that connect, because sometimes we oftentimes found that if we show them fancy buildings and we show them images of lawyers suited in law firms, there is a little bit of a disconnect, and we found that, yeah, we're presenting the aspiration, but it's so much of a disconnect that they just think the aspiration is beyond them, right? So you also have to find a way to tell them that, look, it's an aspirational value, but there's a nice bridge. And it's an aspirational value, but the law is not that elusive, the law is not that sublime, much as we'd like to believe it is. But it's a very real grounded thing, it affects you in myriad ways. So similar to your exercise, we asked a little girl, what do you care about the most? And she said, well, in the northeast state of Sikkim, she says, I love the trees here and I love the mountain. She said, what if somebody were to chop it down? Right? She said, well, I'd be very disappointed. And you can stop it, right? If they're going to chop it down en masse and destroy your forest, because you've got a law. And similarly, somebody else who comes up and says, did you find that you interacted with the law as you came to school? And he says, no. So, well, you were in a house, you were in a property, there's property law. You were in a family, there's family law. You walked out on the street. Of course, in those areas, there are not much traffic or traffic signals, but there's a traffic law. There's a Motor Vehicles Act. Then you came into school, and the school is again on property, your school is again regulated under certain legal norms. So you're touching the law day in and day out, and it plays out in these myriad ways. So that's to tell you the importance of the law. But the fun part of the law is, again, similar to your exercise, well, what do you really like? Like cricket. Let's assume that you're playing a game and you want some rules around the game, and these rules effectively are what the law is about. How do you regulate the game of life? In several sectors. We want the economy to do well, we want family relations to be secure, etc. And then we throw up a problem and we say, okay, now imagine this is the rule, and this is the contest, because you're not sure what the rule really means. This is exactly what lawyers do. This is a dispute. We take some meaning to the norm, and then we decide how the dispute is decided so that we can all live happily and peacefully. And that I think, sort of in exactly, what you were saying, that what is it that you really like? And whatever you like, the beauty of the law is I can connect the law to that in some way. And I should find the connection. And it's a very interesting exercise because it also forces us to really start dumbing down the law, or even to go down to the brass tacks of what the law really means. Because we've not done it. We've grown up taking the law for granted in many ways. We've seen it as a superstructure. But the way that it permeates down to the very core of most of societal relations, even we haven't seen it. And I think it's an interesting exercise even for our students that go in to actually start beginning these basic exercises. What does it mean? How do we start looking at it as a very, very basic tool? Because then it starts making sense to you that this is not alien, this is not a tool of oppression, this is actually a tool to regulate. It can be abused like anything else, but it can also be resuscitated, it can be rescued if you do the right kind of loyalty. And more than anything else, we say, as an aspiration, as an idealistic value, it is the most sublime value that you could ever stand for in terms of help. You said, I help, right? I want to help you. Tell me your problem. I'm here to help. And that's essentially what lawyering is about, that I obliterate myself in some way for your cause. Effectively, whatever the cause may be, you have a client, you have this, I effectively obliterate myself when I say, I'm going to now agitate your cause using the skills and training that I have.
I think the catch is going to be if it's too far a bridge, if it's too far an aspiration to try and do it. Which is why I say, my friend Nandan Kaur, I watched the movie. So it has to be an experience that you can talk to first hand. If I said, Bill Gates has a lawyer, they it's out of the universe, right? I mean, you're talking about watching it in a movie. But if I say I can put you in front of Nandan Kaur, I can put you in front of somebody who makes a difference, I can get you to meet somebody, I can bring him here, you can touch, feel, you relate to it, say, I can do it now. So it has to be, that's why the research is important with the examples you take. So I used to take clothes, for example, right? So they're wearing shoes. I would say, I know the guy who's the lawyer for Nike. They have, the biggest thing is, do you have Nike on shoes? Do you want Nike on chocolates or not? So they get to make those decisions. Can you use it or not? Have you seen the sponsors on IPL? Who do you think does that? All the contracts are drawn up. They get to meet all the stars. They get to do the endorsements and what with it. So it's finding that, and I know the guy who does it. So it has to be that personal connect when you say, here is a guy, here is a name, here's a picture, and I know him and let's talk about it.
So let's throw it open. In terms of what your thoughts are, how can we effectively evangelize the law a little more across the country in a stronger way, in a more meaningful way? What are the bottlenecks, what are the challenges, and how can you help? Going back to your question, how can you help? Can you come with us on some of these visits? Because they see the real embodiment of a lawyer as opposed to people like us who've never really, not really in the practice of law, but are just teaching the values, but without being really grounded in the practice, right? Or students. So it will make a huge difference in people on the ground. But we need to find a way to make that work. I think it will make a huge difference if some of you from within the legal profession can actually come down or find a way in which your views can get across to this community that we are trying to evangelize through.
Maybe I'll start. So maybe put a problem here that we look at. So only give 3 examples. But we need to look at the segment that we are targeting. Our people are down there. They do not even dream of Calvin Hobbes. They do not know, they don't have that kind of aspiration. For them, more than being a lawyer, more than being an engineer, is becoming a livelihood. Now, we are here discussing the Super 30 parallelly going out and convincing them to study engineering. Now, all because of livelihood. So, they are looking at that level. It at times gets difficult to convince them that, oh, this will give you a good livelihood. And this is more than just being a lawyer. So, how do you tackle that one? When first livelihood comes and then comes
they have
big law.
a very good presentation which talks about what the money you will earn as an engineer is, the money you will earn as a doctor is, and how much more money you can make. So I think, I'm assuming that you sold the economic argument, so the brain's all sorted. I'm dealing with the heart here. So you agree that you can make as much money being an engineer, a doctor, and a lawyer. Why would you pick this over the others? So there's a presentation which they do. I don't know if you've seen. They presented it to me when I went to law school, and Shamrad and I have seen that presentation when I was in Calcutta as well. So there is all of that. And there are statistics there which they put out, so it's very credible. So I don't think that really is an issue. It is to get them ahead of that. पैसे तो बन जाएंगे. You definitely make more than an engineer. Now tell me what it is.
Sohan and then
So, what I found that works in rural settings, especially or semi-urban, or no, not necessarily, even it works in the city as well, is, especially depending on the age group, and it even works with adults in the rural area. The first question you ask them is, how many in the room are actually scared of the police? You know, everyone in the room will put up the hand. The next question is who's the police scared of? The police is scared of a lawyer. Who is the politician scared of? Who is the DM of this district scared of? The district judge. You know, then what it does is it automatically creates a sense of excitement and a relevance to the life. If you do not get water here, do you know that you can actually get the DM, ask the DM and he has to reply to you? And if he doesn't do that, you can appeal in 30 days, then he can get his salary cut and things like that. That sense of empowerment and the power of understanding the decision-making process and the way the mechanics of society works. The other question that you ask is, very common thing is domestic violence or people being picked up by the police randomly. You give them the mechanism of how you can actually tackle that. That, okay, fine. Or you've gone to the police station, someone's complained, stolen your cow, cut a tree, the road is not made. You know, you bring it into tangible pieces like that. Then the other thing what I found more than just money is the fact that if you can say that you do not need to hunt for a job if you qualify as a lawyer. You are recognized as something. The other thing is that you get an automatic upgrade when you are applying for government jobs. You know, because see again, with demographics that you're dealing with, essentially you're looking at senses of security. What's the ultimate goal? You know, so it's about how do you get inroads into the entire power structure of the system. Then I found another example that works really well is to talk about the freedom struggle. That the fact is that the British with all its might lost out to largely a movement led by lawyers. You know, and what was it that actually gave you that empowerment? It was a document on which there were things that were written. So obviously that there is a power there, and if you can actually articulate that, you can actually, rise above yourself and you can become special in the society. You would be someone who someone comes to, and that's how I have seen largely when I've been doing legal training programs, is to actually remove the fear of the oppression of law and how you can turn the tables, and that it's very accessible to become a lawyer. That's it. Yeah.
I hope all the teams have taken notes when you go for your sensitization. I think these are different kinds of approaches you can adopt. So if you go into peaceful sort of northeast kind of setting in Sikkim, maybe not the oppression angle so much, but an alternative angle. But if you go into an area where is our Chhattisgarh or any of the other areas, you might want to pick up with the oppression threat, the cops and all that. So a diversity of approaches, but the idea is to get a mix of approaches depending on the area that you're into and see what works best for the connect. For the connect, and I think it's a great point that give them the sense of the importance of the law, the power of the law, right? In many ways.
I went to army school, KVs.
Sorry. Actually, he had his hand up before, so why don't you make your point and then we can.
No, I just want to make a very simple point. I think what the Muralisa was making is that you use the student's experience and build the relevance of law into that context. So, for example, as a member of the middle class, my experience with the law is rather benign. It's like reading Calvin Hobbes or buying an IT product. Whereas for a member of the underprivileged section, maybe their experience with the law is rather hostile or antagonistic. So you can say that, because their position in society is rather vulnerable. So you can sort of contextualize the law as something that can make you stronger in society. It can help you battle the hostile forces that you interact with on a day-to-day basis. It's basically working the relevance of law, working our sensitization programs into the context in which there is.
So one example that happened with me when we went to sensitization, our first school was KV Army, and all the students were, their parents were in the defense. So I connected with them using the movie of Few Good Men, and I said that what if someone gets into trouble, who helps them? It's us lawyers who help them. So then they connected to us. Otherwise they were like, okay, a lawyer is just someone who has black and white lies all the time. there were just 11th standard kids, and that's exactly what they said. And
I give another example. I had one of these. I do one of, not just my son's school, I do other schools as well. They have, the Sevaks. And he said, one of them said, they haven't got pay, they live in very poor conditions. And I said, who do you think fights their battles for them to get back pay, for them to get promotional pay, for them to get pay commission results? And they're reading all this in the press. And it was in the press that time where the pay commission, the sixth pay commission had not been implemented for the other ranks. It had been implemented only for the officers. So I picked newspapers, whatever is there in the newspapers today in that context. And usually what they are asking about, if they're older kids, they would have read today's press where it would have said this. Or that they haven't got pay parity. So people who retired before a particular date and after a particular date, they have not been paired up. So if you retired before a particular date, you were in the previous scale. If you retired after a particular date, you got on a different scale. Those are the kind of things which in the family, in their community, bothers them.
The other one that I found that always works is you want to always beat your parents at an argument.
That's very good.
And you go to law school, you learn how to argue.
Okay. I don't want to play party pooper or burst
we need
party,
party pooper
but the issue is this: if
the party is wrong, it must be.
given what we spoke of some time ago on the resource raising and the difficulties around it, if there are too many people who are coming into the system as a result of too much effort being put in to bring new people in, is there not a strain on existing resources for existing scholars? Are we constantly shifting the financial goalposts because there are just more and more people coming in? Because genuinely the financial thing is going to be determinant on how quickly and how successfully the entire organization can move. Now let us say you plan for 10 a year or 12 a year, and your outreach and your access and your sensitization program just prove to be so good that you get 35 a year or 40 a year. What happens to the thing then? So one necessarily has to be tied in with the other, because if you're trying to raise funds for 10, you will raise funds for 8. You will not raise funds for 35.
I think that's a great point, but it leads back to the question of maybe, so in 10 years from now, and this is our optimistic vision of how this is going to, 10 years from now, we believe that 80 to 90% or even 100% of these scholars must be supported by the law schools themselves. And we're looking to work towards that ecosystem, because otherwise it's not sustainable. There is no reason why the law schools should not be granting fee waivers to low-income students. As a matter of policy, as a matter of principle. And 10 years, we're giving ourselves 10 years to really advocate that. So the first year we had one law school giving a fee waiver. Over 4 years we had 3 colleges. Now we have Nirma, thanks to Som's intervention, who agreed to say, who told her, and Nirma I would rate as among the top 7. Nirma's quality, because when he told me I didn't believe it, but I actually went there. And Nirma is the only law school that had a little manual on Gonzaga's law teaching techniques. Now Gonzaga is a place that no vice chancellor or no senior faculty in any of these national law schools would have heard of. It's a place where the sort of brain trust for legal education really is, where there's constant R&D on how to teach best. They had a manual and they were actually implementing it. Right? Now, with some of these law schools, if we can tie up, and the private spaces, they're more than happy because they need the branding, they need the name, they don't have the visibility. This is, in many ways, we're getting pushed back on the NLU model because of outside NLU people, but this could be a way in which we get the outside to co-opt into an NLU process, like essentially. And so if we work out those deals along the way with a lot of these other ecosystem players, then 8 to 10 years, we want to make sure that we are not spending, at least for the tuition, which is a major component. Now 60,000 rupees a year or 3 lakhs for 5 years for stipend expenses is easy to do even on a 30 scholar budget, even on a 60 scholar budget. And the other thing is, we also, in the first 2 years, we also, because there was a lot of investment of the scholars in the process of training, if some of them got into a very low rank law school within the NLU bracket, and you'll be surprised that some of the lowest ranked NLUs actually charge the highest. I mean, they obviously didn't have economic advisors, but something is wrong somewhere where they actually charge. So the highest of 3.5 lakhs is actually charged by Ranchi. or someone called it the raunchy law school. But actually called me and said, do you know anything of the raunchy law school? I said, most law schools are raunchy, but which one do you have in mind? And then I realized this, raunchy is raunchy. so anyway, so to tell you that, so a lot of them are really high paying. So if they charge, X amount of fees for so long, they need to have these.
I'm not saying not to do this, but I'm just saying that if we do this, we have to keep
You have to be conscious, yeah.
We have to be conscious of the fact
Absolutely.
that if you
And
sell a story
because
to
you're building expectations.
yeah, exactly. If you sell a story to somebody and
You
then you
have to-
can't finance that story, it's going to be counterproductive.
Absolutely. No, absolutely, man.
I think with what you've heard from Pramod's session, and we spent time before coming to this, so most of this has been work. I don't think we'll have a problem. If you just,
even I hope not.
it will not. It will not. See, if you just run my course and we'll get thought about it, we will fund the whole lot for this year, just on that one program.
And that's a pilot. If we can run that, if what Murli is proposing to run a course, and if we can ramp that up, because I know that many of you also have a teaching bug in you. Leaders within the legal profession. So we can tap into that. And anyway, you're not looking at monetizing it. So if you can create that little market for legal training and teaching, and cater to industry segments that will actually buy that at a heavy premium price, and also give it to the law schools free of cost to their students. You're ramping up the legal education ecosystem. 2, you're building up expertise within the legal profession and within industry. And 3 is you're contributing to IDEA and making IDEA ramp up. So I think it's a great win from all counts. And if this pilot really ramps up, we really hope that many more of you can pick up and do this. Maybe build a summer school out of it. Lots of things that we can do with in terms of raising funds.
The other thing, taking off on that point, we could actually have web-based programs as well, webinars or what have you, with the nominal fee of 100 or 200 or 500.
Make a small contribution.
And all of that goes towards, idea.
But lock it off.
Different ways to.
I think there's one
Once
thing where
you view, it should not be available for repetitivity, because the concept is, if I know I'll get it for free, nobody will do it.
no, not for free.
That's the problem of the.
But that's okay. You can make a.
That's what I'm saying. Exactly.
I want to say another thing that from my experience, I didn't have the
So Tony, we look at you to drive an online model.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is why I'm more than happy to do that. We can do that.
Yeah, and we get enough people to.
Absolutely. We have done webinars, start. So yeah, we can. Yeah, we have enough people who can start at the webinar. Exactly.
And you get there for $1,000 each, you've done
1,000 if you get, you'll make a lot of money.
That's what I'm saying. If they know it's for a cause, they don't mind writing $1,000.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry.
So basically, I just want to say that what he's saying as a valid thing, and we'll be able to probably do maybe 0.01% of the real possibility if we follow this model. Maybe we need to think of alternative models which can actually scale up much faster. For example, if we can actually say there are many students across India who are actually thinking of going to law school, but they don't actually have base training, access to good training, and maybe they cannot afford it. For example, you'll be surprised to hear maybe in Bombay, LST charges 80,000 rupees for 80,000 rupees for a whole year. I think it's a 2-year or 1.5 year course. Yeah. So correct. So if it is in Bombay, you are in Bombay, you cannot have access to good CLAT training. If you are even my parents are both working with the government, maybe teachers and all that, they couldn't have put me through something like that. So very simple thing is that if we really we can put out a lot of our training material out there for free. Someone was suggesting that we could sell it for training. I don't accept it because if you are going to wrestle with other 16 companies doing the same thing, marketing it, I mean, not only loss of credibility but loss of an opportunity of putting it out for free and actually increasing the standard of industry.
By doing that's a great suggestion. By doing that, you actually can put the 16 companies out of business. And you can actually really democratize access to good material.
Yeah, not necessarily put them out of business, but force them to improve their standards. Because I think right now they're in a pathetic standard. Like I have worked in the industry for a few years, taught in a few states. I do not think that they are actually doing a good job. It's actually left to the students, the brainy ones, work hard and get through.
If you have good content, then that's a very good idea. We can make it freely available on the net.
Yeah, in fact, I use the Leja free online learning management system from my site up to 20,000 students a year.
Right now, and get it sponsored.
Okay.
Make it free to the user
Yeah.
and get somebody to sponsor it.
Yeah, so sponsor it, if there is any cost, sponsor IDIA will have farther sources of money.
Look at this. Cleverest guy in the room.
And in fact, right now, the new companies that ICSI launched a series of videos because the home sector is conducting comparing the shows. It's a series of some 15 videos of different aspects. And within 2 days, I could see when I spread around, people started making out time 1 hour every day on a series of 7 days and hitting on the video.
The perfect way to monetize it is to tell ICICI, please give it out for $1,000 and make that donation to IDEA.
I would like to make one more
Get
suggestion.
them all to add on.
From what Murali said earlier, what he was essentially saying is that there are a lot of inspiring stories in the legal fraternity, okay? Now the stories are like, there are a lot of rag to riches stories, maybe there are other kind of struggles people have gone through. A lot of these are very inspirational, but we actually, when we went through law school for 5 years, we actually realized there are a lot of good examples in front of us. What all we had was throughout the 5 years is that you go and work for like a top law firm or a top company and make a certain amount of money or someone is doing litigation. But the real stories do not come out. And how I think IDIA can contribute. In fact, we are doing a small initiative on that front and we love to collaborate if there's an opportunity. But what we think we can do is get say even in this room there are maybe 10 people who have really great stories. And if you tell those stories to people, they'll be excited. Now, that doesn't have to be in a sensitization workshop, It's not probably possible. But we can have put up those stories online. I really greatly believe in putting things online. Even you can maybe come out with a small booklet which is 5 or 10 stories. And if you think someone is really inspired, interested in the course or whatever, we can give it to the school library, we can give it to individuals, and those even in vernacular languages maybe, right? I think that will make a huge difference in terms of people really understanding what they can do with this tool. Because I personally, I was going into medicine, one day I changed my mind and decided to do law. And that is because I had seen Sachin Malhan again, talking about law as a career, and he talked about the possibilities that, that I can do. And everyone around me actually opposed the idea of me doing law. People thought that I'm just lazy and I don't want to write JEE, that's why I'm doing it. But the point is that I didn't care because it actually connected with me somewhere that I can maybe do things that I want to be a person I want to be by studying law. But that seed of an idea, to plant it, we need stories. And those stories have to be communicated not just in a workshop, but in a more structured way.
We should get certain videos or certain presentations brought down.
But I did one with your IDEA teams in camp. You were there. On that Saturday.
Yes, absolutely.
About all the different things and all personal stuff. So I agree with you. There's a lot of stories out there.
I think that's a great point, and I think particularly with an Indian audience, nothing like a great story. Storytelling format has been one of our best modes of education.
Pradhaman put together a couple of stories. Because when he went back to law school the last time he was here, he went and spoke about various
lawyers from the
lawyers.
So
I remember he was telling me that.
So please make a note of that. We need to tap all the stories from there and really create some. So I think it's a good. So can we do one thing? Can we quickly break? There's one more here. Suki, sorry. So
I just wanted to add to what some of the panelists are saying. Basically, what we do in some of our sensitization is we gather the legal services clinics. So we conduct skits regarding problems they have. So we have skits regarding domestic violence, RTI, RTE. So essentially, it puts them in the center and it says, what are your problems? So we have skits with regard to FIRs, with domestic violence, RTE, RTI. So whatever issues people have, so we ask them, do you all have issues with street lights coming up on your streets? Do they not work? Do you all have issues with water? Do your parents often face issues of domestic violence? Anybody who's had a maid as a parent and gets taken away on false accounts of theft. So we put them in that situation such that they can picture themselves and see that as part of the problem, and then we give them solutions as to what they can do. So it's essentially twofold. So one is legal awareness itself, and secondly we tell them this is how you go about it, and law helps you achieve that, and you can get across that way. So I think that helps to a large extent, because a lot of the students even come back to us and talk to us about their problems and say, how do we figure this out, how do we help? So So that way I think we reach out a lot more.
At the same time, I think it's important to break the stereotype around law, like to add to this skit, I mean, like you were saying, it kind of enforces the stereotype. And I've had people tell me, my kid is really argumentative, so that's why I think he should, become a lawyer. I actually saw a CV where someone put down a core skill as can speak continuously for a long period of time. So, I mean, what I'm saying is it might be useful to say that law is also about knowledge and that different kinds of people can be lawyers and good lawyers. So apart from not just that there are options with lawyering apart from litigation, but also that the core skill is not necessarily argumentation.
Persuasion.
Okay, so just one more example that just worked out. So the target group for us inspiration is schools of 11th or 12th standards, and nowadays it starts bikes and all.
Yeah, that's a great point actually. Where should we have the target audience, right? Because we'll break on that, but Pratik will take it up, which is we started with class 12 kids entering class 12. We found it's not enough because we have only 1 month effectively, which is the winter month. Because after that they're going to the boards and they're going to various things that they have to write the board exams, and we get another month. So we get December and we get April before they hit CLAT and May. Not enough, especially if we need to ramp up the English. And we started taking them start of class 11. Again, better than class 12, but we still think we need, if we get 3 years, much better. Then we can do on 2 years. But the lower down we go, we actually start interfering with their natural growth and their, because in the sense that you pick someone in class 9 and let, we think you might make a good lawyer and start training them up right up front. It might just, somewhere skew up career choices. We don't know. So, we'd love to hear thoughts from you on that and when we should start really intervening, or at least, or follow a sort of multivarious approach where we at least throw out the career option and then come back and get people who are interested later. But at least let them all know when they're in class 7, class 8, etc. There's this beautiful career option, so they can, sort of have that on their panel and then come back and do the training, etc. If they firmly made up their mind after a while and they cross that. So we'll come back and discuss this. So please join us for tea, and then if you can be back in about 15 minutes, we'll wind up.